if we can keep you just marginally better, that is worth doing. And I think that's really one of the goals that we have at Terlingua, is just to not transform people's lives, but to make things just a little bit more bearable and safe.
Welcome to Long Run Labs, a weekly podcast from the team behind For the Long Run podcast, telling the stories of those running the outdoor industry where endurance and entrepreneurship meet. Quick word about the huddle before we get into today's episode. If you're building a business, you already know how isolating it can get. You're making decisions daily that most people in your life don't fully understand. And the surface level networking stuff, it rarely helps. You walk out of those rooms with a stack of business cards and none of the clarity you actually needed. What my co-founders Jason Fitzgerald, Ross Yellen, and I are building at The Huddle is different. It's a peer advisory community built for early stage founders who want real accountability and real conversation. You get placed in a small cohort of people across different industries who actually have decision-making authority in their businesses. You meet monthly, you workshop each other's problems, and you build the kind of relationships where someone will tell you the thing you needed to hear, not just what sounds good. There are in-person sessions here in Boulder and virtual cohorts open to founders anywhere in the country. The three of us started The Huddle because we wanted this and it didn't exist. If you're at a point where going at it alone isn't working, or you're ready to level things up in your business, go to findmyhuddle.com and fill out the application. Link in the show notes, and we'll be in touch from there. And welcome back. We have Doug Waters joining from New York City. Doug, stoked to chat. We met a couple weeks ago at Outdoor Market Alliance, and I fell in love with the mission you're on and the way you're thinking about your business. So welcome to Long Run Labs.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
For sure. So the first question on these podcasts, it's always tough. And that question is, who is Doug?
Oh, that's a very tough question. So I'm the founder of Terlingua Threads. We are a hot weather adventure apparel company. So, we have a deep admiration of a lot of apparel brands out there, but we're focused solely on the hot weather side of things. So above 90 Fahrenheit and 30 Celsius. So that's what I'm working on. But besides that, I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I have visited all 63 national parks, and that actually kind of gave way towards this endeavor. And outside of that, I'm writing a book on the parks and like one vignette and one story from each of them.
Yeah, where did the love for the national parks come from? I mean, it's an easy one to fall in love with, but you could fall in love with hiking. You could fall in love with national parks. You can fall in love with playing guitar. The path you chose, how did that come to be?
Yeah, it was multifactorial in retrospect. As a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts and an Eagle Scout, and I had such a close-knit and wonderful patrol. We all ended up getting Eagle and, kept in touch even through college. And that was a really great way to, develop an affinity for the outdoors in Southern California. I also had, during my undergrad, some really wonderful friends that got me really exposed to hiking in the Sierra Nevadas and in the Channel Islands off the coast of LA. And I think what made it a more explicit goal was actually during COVID. I think people were getting a little bit stir crazy and it's like, you know what? We have a lot of wonderful space out there. And I think the thing that's unique about the national park specifically, and not just hiking in XYZ place, is if you think about it, the national park system is one of the few branches of government that has a really high affinity and high net promoter score for both the left and the right. I just view the park system as a beautiful mechanism for societal and political healing. And they just do a very good job in being accessible to people of all backgrounds. And hey, the parks are beautiful. So what's not to love?
Yeah, I love that. I had a conversation with the CEO of Protect Our Winters. Her name is Erin, and she talked about the outdoor state, and the outdoor state represents over 100 million people, and that ranges from runners and hikers and like trail runners and cyclists to hunters and fishers and overlanding and all of these things that you can segment based on political affiliation for a specific sport, perhaps, but you cannot do that for the outdoor state overall. It's like pretty 50-50. When it comes down to it. And so the ability for these people to all work together we saw what happened with the public land buyback. A lot of people who voted for Trump said, this isn't what I voted for. And they pushed back on what the government was doing. And it was a bipartisan level of support. And you saw Cam Haines, who has 2 million Instagram followers, who voted for Trump, pushing back on all of that. And it's fascinating to see what happens, and this like rally cry in support of this thing we love so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really comes down to people have this innate need for time in the outdoors, no matter what your background is. And especially someone who lives in a city currently, I feel kind of stir crazy, which is why whenever I can get some time, it's really appreciated.
Definitely. So talk me through your background. You're like the prototypical person you'd expect to live in San Francisco. You've gone to Wharton, you went to Y Combinator, but you're in New York.
I was actually an advisor for, I did some Y Combinator-esque things. No, we weren't part of the batch. We did their startup school, and I was an advisor for Venture for America at one point. But yeah, very much, at one point I had the software craze. So I did my undergrad at UCLA, did a double major, double minor, and figured, what, this is prototypical to going to finance or to consulting. And so I did consulting. And pre-MBA, I actually had a wonderful experience with consulting. I know a lot of people, didn't have the most positive things to say, but I actually really liked it. But this was pre-COVID. Absolutely loved my MBA experience, and we can talk about that later. I think one of the most beautiful things about the MBA is the people, and not from the sake of networking. I actually hate that term. I use it from the term of friendship and friendship building. Just wonderful people there. Post MBA, going into consulting or back to the same company, something had changed. I think there was a collective burnout from the pandemic, but also the gears were starting to turn towards the AI era. And that has fundamentally shifted the consulting industry. And it was kind of right before that really started taking place that I kind of saw the writing on the wall. And I kind of want to start getting out, but wasn't sure what. My background was actually in the automotive industry. I've been a car guy ever since I could crawl. And so I was working on some exciting projects with OEMs and suppliers. I thought I was actually going to end up doing something with either a new car company or an established car company.
Cool.
But it was on a trip to Big Bend National Park when I was doing consulting that I just fell in love with Terlingua, Texas and Big Bend National Park. And I started thinking, whoa, why is this place so undervisited and underrated? And I was in a hollowed out Airbnb, Airstream, no plumbing, no electricity, no cell phone service. All you can do is just think. And that made me start thinking about, hey, how do we stay adventurous in a warming climate? When I got back to civilization in El Paso, I texted one of my best friends, Daniel, like, hey, we need to think about this. Daniel and I were friends for business school, but we were never working together. And that was 2 years ago. And lo and behold, there was enough product market fit and there was enough of a something there that you're like, okay, we're going to take the leap of faith and bootstrap this.
So I love the day zero, day one discovery. Like what was it that enabled you to go from this is something that I'm interested in to I've now registered the domain name or I've filed the LLC? Like breaking stages is something I'm obsessed with understanding. It took me 3 years to quit my job. And there was like a inflection point where those 3 years kind of peaked and I was like, there's no going back from the thought that I just had, and I have to make this change. And so I love unpacking, like, what is that specific, what was that breaking point that got you to the place where you're like, I'm not doing the car thing, I'm not doing finance, I'm not doing consulting. This is how I'm going to spend my time.
Yeah. I think it ultimately came down to, it was an exciting enough problem to work on. If you're to go into an REI, even in the middle of summer, you're going to be seeing a lot of fleeces and puff jackets. And that's stuff to keep you warm, not necessarily to keep you cool. One of my best friends, Joel, from UCLA, he was telling me that, like, hey, he really struggles to find stuff that he absolutely likes in the summer. And, he's kind of one of my Yodas for all things outdoor. He is he will have the most niche brands that I have never heard of from the middle of nowhere, or the backwoods of Italy. And he will say like, yeah, this was a lackluster space at the time. It just seems like the afterthought because, it's hard to be profitable for summer layers when all the money seems to be in winter. So from a business perspective, it wasn't actually a golden goose in obvious sight. And who knows, we're still in the early days. We might not know if it's a golden goose, but we know that it was a problem to be solved because, the status quo has largely been polyester layers, which are incredibly heat trapping, and odor prone and rely on pretty harsh chemical sprays to get any sort of UV protection. And we started experimenting with different fabrics. And once we saw that, hey, this is actually legitimately more comfortable for us to use in our personal hikes, in Death Valley or Joshua Tree or Arches National Park. And then when we started bringing prototypes with other outdoor guides, and they started like, whoa, when can I buy this? That's actually what started to validate it. Like, maybe this could be just a business and not just like a passion project.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like the LA Marathon, for example, that had to divert their, or give an option to divert their finish line from 26.2 miles to 18 miles because of heat. And, the commentary from the trail world was like, oh, 80 degrees, that's a cool day for, Western states. That's what it is, at night kind of a thing. And so, the road running space will have to adapt how races are run. Yeah. Maybe they need to be earlier in the day, but then you're dealing more with humidity versus sun exposure and heat. Or you do it, in San Francisco in July and everywhere else outside of the summer. But in the trail space, like, you don't really have the ability to say we're going to start an hour earlier. A race like Leadville starts at 4 a.m. and most finishers are finishing, between 2 and 6 a.m. And so you're out there for the entire day, or even if you're, only quote unquote doing 100K, you're finishing around dinner time.
I just did a marathon. I mean, like my first ever marathon last year, I felt pretty accomplished. I mean, the fact that you do ultras, that's something.
But that's the thing. Like, I ran a 3-hour 17-mile race this past weekend, and I'm like, this is far. So yes, it's objectively, a marathon is objectively far, and any distance is impressive. But the point is, like, anyone that's going beyond the marathon, you're running throughout the heat of the day. Like, nobody is fast enough to finish a 50-miler, before lunch, unless you start at 3 a.m. Right. And so this is a problem that needs solving. It's not a nice to have.
It's a need to have. And I think, my mind goes in two different directions, or I guess they're parallel paths. One of them is the fact that, we don't want to overpromise in terms of what we think the edge of technology in fabrics and textiles can do. I mean, when we are working in very, like, legitimately hot environments, like above 90 Fahrenheit, 30 Celsius, the fact is we will need to adapt our behaviors as well. So if there are races that can take place an hour earlier, so be it. But otherwise, we view Terlingua Threads, or any hot weather clothing for that matter, as just one arrow in your quiver. Like, clothing in and of itself is not going to overcome reckless decision making, or poor hydration, or lack of sunscreen, or overexerting yourself and pushing it when you're not listening to your body. So I think there has to be a lot more mindfulness and wisdom around your decision making when it comes to hot weather. I mean, we're a very much a safety first company. Like, we're low noise, low bullshit. I don't know if I can say that. You can bleep it out.
Go for it.
But, ultimately, we think that safety is a behavior, not just a product. The other element is that we really want to focus on delivering performance at the margin and to make things marginally more comfortable. So one of my good buddies in New York, his name's Victor Zaitun. He has an incredible track record in the ultra sphere. He did an actually several ultramarathons from Los Angeles to Las Vegas via the Mojave Desert. And in fact, for one of them, he took a very early prototype of the White Sands hoodie, which is what I'm wearing currently, and he says, "Doug, this was incredible. For my next race, I actually want to buy some for my crew." And for the next one, it was an invite only 300 miler, 500 kilometer in the Atacama Desert, high UV space. And he won, which is incredible. And it was so stoked that, he was trying the production ready version. And, hearing his comments, you just hear just how difficult of a race it was. It's not like saying, oh, because he was wearing Terlingua, it was easy peasy walk in the park. No, it was still one of the most grueling experiences he ever had in his life. I think the difference is that if we can keep you just 8 to 10 or even 4 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit more comfortable, it's still going to feel like it's hot outside. You're still going to sweat. But if we can keep you just marginally better, that is worth doing. And I think that's really one of the goals that we have at Terlingua, is just to not transform people's lives, but to make things just a little bit more bearable and safe.
So going back to the decision making, you were talking about going this way or that way. The opportunity is that, you could look at construction jobs. You could look at people who are working on buses in bus yards and trains and train yards in the summer in New York or anywhere in the heat. And your solution probably is valid and valuable for these people in these outdoor jobs. How do you think about focus, and how do you think about which lane to pick so that, if you, the saying is like, if you're for everyone, you're for no one. Well, you could be for everyone to some degree. How do you, particularly as you're just launching this brand at the time we record this, you're pre-launch. And the time we air this, it'll be live. How do you think about the focus?
That's an excellent question. And I think when you're brand crafting, and I use the word craft because there is an art to it, not just a science. When you're brand crafting in the early days, I don't think it's as simple as just coming up with your prototypical, standard user. Oh, we think so-and-so likes to do blah, 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 and likes to eat blah, blah, blah during this time. We have to figure out what we're good at and what those set of features or design ethos might actually speak most to. And the fact of the matter is, you might also have something that is completely applicable to one core user, but is actually enjoyed or appreciated by a wider base. And I think one company I actually have so many positive things to say about most brands in the outdoor space. I think we're very great. We're very blessed that they're good role models. But one of them that comes to mind is Patagonia. They have a great track record for sustainability and good business practices. But, when I think of Patagonia, I think about my trips that I took to the Arctic Circle for Gates of the Arctic and Copic Valley National Parks. I was using Patagonia layers. So it's clearly meant and designed for environments like Alaska. And yet, walk around Midtown Manhattan or, Georgetown, D.C. in the fall or the winter, and you'll see Patagonia everywhere. So there's an element that if you can do your use case of what you intend to excellently, it can create a little bit of an aspirational ethos.
Right.
Now, granted, we don't want to be perceived as a feigning luxury or a wannabe aspirational ethos, and we can get into that later. But we think that if you can start small, that doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be remained pigeonholed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had this conversation with Erin Cooper. She's at Salomon, North America, and she was talking about how some of the early trail shoes from Salomon are popular in more of like a lifestyle setting for people who live in Manhattan. And it's like you're not taking these shoes onto the trails, but it's a signal that this is something that you care about. And you may or may not actually run trails, but that's the signal that you're looking to share with people. It's like that Gorpcore culture of, I know what this is for, and I, want to be perceived as someone who plays in that space.
it's funny you say that. So I think uh, two concurrent thoughts. So one of them, when it comes to brand signaling, I think from the Wharton School, Americus Reed and Jonah Berger have both done really excellent jobs of conveying the idea that, brands can be a function of social capital, and they signal like what identities, we hope to aspire. Like if you wear, say, Leroy's or Supreme or Patagonia or Viore, those are all four very different identities.
Right.
And so there is this element of, even if you aren't using that specific thing in that intended use, there is a signaling. So that's exactly what you're saying. The other idea is that we are also designing our products and have designed them over the course of 2+ years now. Wow. Of just iterating and realizing that actually, in order to be an effective product, it need not look like it's hyper specialized. And what I mean by that is, if you want a very good and effective backpacking shirt, it doesn't have to be styled in a way that's so garish and weird in the city. Our backpacking long sleeve and short sleeve button up shirts, they have ventilation throughout the shoulder yoke, along the sides, under the underarms, but it looks like a regular button up shirt. And now, to be clear, we do not say that, oh, this is the only shirt you'll ever need. I mean, it kind of annoys us when we hear that on a lot of D2C ads, because we're only for hot weather. But we think that it's kind of fruitless if you have something that's really effective for a use case, in this case, hot weather, but can only be worn in certain environments. So we want broadly applicable products, whether it's the city or the trail.
I love that. Going back to your story about your friend who won a couple of ultras, or won one.
Yeah, Victor.
Ultra. Victor. I had a conversation with my friend Cole Zucker, who launched a brand, Kila Running, and they make custom insoles using your smartphone's camera.
Cool. Yeah.
And yeah, super cool. The technology is the same technology that enables the phone to identify via Face ID twins. Like, this is not the person who owns this phone, so don't open the phone. And the face is similar to the size of your foot, so it's like a perfect use case. I released that episode the week that we're recording this, so that would have been March 24th or 3rd. So if people want to spin back and listen to that one, is fascinating conversation about fundraising and growth and lessons learned over decades of time in the field. But the parallel is Cole's approach is, I want to work with the top athletes who will validate the fact that this is not a nice to have, but like once they've tasted it, they can't not use it, meaning the insole. And it's enabled them to perform in ways and feel good about performance in ways that they weren't before. So now they can't imagine doing it without it. And so he's taken the professional athlete route and uses influencers to talk about what his professional athletes are doing and accomplishing versus having an influencer say, this is the best custom insert that I've ever had, and leveraging elite and athletic performance as the validator versus somebody who's more coin operated. How do you think about growth? How do you think about having people on podiums with your apparel versus other growth tactics?
On the topic of people who are truly excellent in their field, like how you just described, or with Victor, I think it's not just so much that, oh, we want to be seen with them. They have developed extraordinary abilities or skills or insights of where we'd be remiss to not genuinely learn from them. So when we're partnering with folks who are incredible endurance runners or are, outdoor guides in Africa or in Utah or Australia, we don't just want to be seen like, oh, have the Terlingua coyote on whatever you're doing. It's like, no, like in your experience in the wilderness or in the outback or in the savannah or in the mountains, how does our product fail? Are there things that you would change about it? And the things that Victor, brought up, it was fascinating. For example, one of the earliest prototypes, our hood was a little bit too small. And so now we intentionally make it oversized so that you can fit it over a hat, or you can have it tucked in underneath. That's one of the benefits of lightweight material. But we'd be remiss not to listen to these folks. And actually, that's going to be the key of growth, not just from a expansion point of view, but from a product growth point of view.
I want to dive more into the growth and the go-to-market strategies. But before we get there, as a Wharton guy, I'm sure you've gone through your fair share of SWOT analyses.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
So as you thought about starting the company, and the reason I ask this is because a lot of people listening to this are either doing the thing or wanting to do the thing that you've done, which is start something or build something. How did you go through the exercise of here's what I need to do to get this thing off the ground? Like, what did the nuts and bolts or the X's and O's of the SWOT analysis of the, like, what will it, if I want this company to exist, what will it take? What did that look like for you?
So when I think of frameworks, actually the one that comes to mind is probably less so the SWOT analysis in of itself. I actually like Scott Galloway's framing of figuring out, okay, what do you have the ability to deliver well? What can you do that you actually are interested in? Actually, what serves a function? And I think that's the way where I was actually framing it for me personally. So in terms of doing it well, I had experience with product development and strategy and iteration within the consulting lens, but also, given my gear background, I actually, almost every brand, I have something from them for my outdoor days. And then, we can talk about the potential demand. But as far as, that can quickly become a very academic exercise.
Right.
And I think during the development of Terlingua, Dunning-Kruger was in full motion and it's like, wow, this is a pretty easy space to crack. Let me just talk to some, but
suppliers.
Nobody
else is doing it well, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is no one else, look how smart Doug is. He realizes something well, no, it's not that Doug is smart. It's that it's really tough challenge. And I need to keep this in mind as we're, saying at the time of this is airing, we have just launched. We are brand new. This podcast episode might age very poorly. I mean, it could be gone in 5 years, or we could be doing pretty well. Either one. So
we're only taking 3%.
Yeah. Please help us. So it's once you get off the Dunning-Kruger effect of Mount Stupid, you realize, wow, actually developing things at a profitable margin, there's a trade-off. For example, if you want stuff that's going to perform really well in the heat, you have to use higher quality materials than what is typically seen in the outdoor industry, especially for hot weather. But then that raises your input cost, and in order to operate more and stay afloat, you actually have to have higher prices. But then consumers are used to things being priced a certain way, and so there's this balancing act. That combined with the fact that to prototype, you have to find really trusted development partners, some of whom work really well with startups, some of whom don't, some of them who have horrendously high minimum order quantities. One thing that we love about our design partner in Portugal is, she's been with us since the very beginning. She knows how weird I am and the design quirks that we like to have within Terlingua. And she can accommodate that. So for anyone who's thinking of starting something, if you need to be working with different design or manufacturing partners, realize that they are part of your team. Love them, respect them, and honor them because they are going to be your greatest strength.
Talk to me about the startup capital and capitalizing something like this. I believe you said you're bootstrapping at the moment.
We are.
I've had many conversations on this show about the role of angels and VC and private equity, although we haven't talked about private equity nearly as much as angels and VC.
Yeah.
But talk to me about the decision to bootstrap and how you're creating that initial velocity.
Yeah, well, I think it's evidenced by the wrinkles under my eye bags that I'm bootstrapping, because with bootstrapping, you become the Renaissance man or the Renaissance woman. You have to all of a sudden do all and everything. There are trade-offs. It was a very intentional decision. So my co-founder, he has actually had experience launching a very successful brand in the footwear space. And they have raised money from some different investors and angels. And I'm so grateful to have Daniel as my co-founder. One, he's just one of my best friends in the world, and he keeps me sane. But two is that he brings a lot of insight, especially when it comes to fundraising. Most of the equity that he doled out was to investors or angels that unfortunately haven't ended up providing a lot of strategic guidance. And especially when you're in an early company, that strategic guidance is far more important than the capital itself. And oftentimes that strategic guidance can sometimes at best be neutral or uninvasive, and at worst intentionally try to steer you in a different direction. And that's when it gets very dangerous. One of the offers that we did get for Terlingua, because we have had some folks who get wind of what we're doing and it's like, whoa, can I be an investor? Either through connections from UCLA or from Wharton or friends of friends, or even my time when we worked briefly in consumer VC. And in some of these conversations, they're, first of all, they're really friendly conversations, which I was kind of surprised with. It's not too intimidating. But you can see right off the bat that sometimes they aren't aligned with why we do certain things. One of them, for example, is like, why are you not producing in Vietnam or Bangladesh? It's like, well, produce in Portugal. We really like the craftsmanship of Portugal. We like the fact that we have a trusted relationship with this partner and that she knows us super well and we just have a good friendship, let alone the fact that she's excellent and capable. But that investor just wasn't on board with that. And it's like, you know what? Okay, completely understand. But it was just a different business. So I can talk more about all the hats that you have to put on if you decide to bootstrap it.
Yeah, I can imagine that when you're about to build or building something that hasn't been done before, there are people that want a seat on that train. To your point, the strategic guidance versus like only using cash. I spent a lot of time connecting angels to brands, and a lot of those brands are looking for more than just the dollars. So like I'm advising and investing in a company called Laurel, and Laurel makes a better version of race timing. It's cheaper, it's Bluetooth.
That's cool.
It doesn't you can deploy it out of a backpack instead of a truck, and it can work in areas that don't have cell coverage because it can ping satellites in addition to cell towers. So like the same technology that enables your phone to reach satellites when you're in high alpine or in places without cell coverage. And so it would be very easy for not very easy, but it'd be simple for lots of cash to be deployed in an opportunity where the product is delivering more value at like 95% lower cost. But it comes down to like, how do you bring the right people on board who are adding their own intelligence and their own connections? And so like my friend who works at NVIDIA invested, and he just bought a San Francisco running company, and he's doing races. And so Vivek's dollar is valuable more than just the fact that it's a dollar, but he has all of this institutional knowledge and then the actual ability to deploy the thing in events that he's organizing. And those are examples where, a dollar is not worth a dollar. Like his dollar might be worth $3.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so it's like finding the 1 + 1 = 3 opportunities where it's going beyond just that capability of like, here's a bunch of cash, go play with it, versus here's a bunch of cash and I want to participate in helping deploy this cash and making it extremely valuable.
Yeah. Well, the thought that comes to mind is, one has to be, and I'm assuming one as in like, here's what we did with Terlingua. We're very aware of what our values are. So first of all, respecting our craftspeople and respecting our customers, bar none. Like,
right.
And so then from there, we can extrapolate, well, okay, what are the other values that we embody? And then also, what are our strategic assets that we have within us as a company and as us as founders? But then also, what are the areas in which we need guidance and where we don't know what we don't even know. And to your point, I think this is where you can have like really interesting conversations with angels when they are actually truly experts in the field. I think one of the interesting reasons why in consumer VC, it's just hasn't taken off to the same extent that we had like VC in software or aerospace and defense or hardware or fill in the blank, or especially life sciences, is because in consumer, it's really tempting to be a jack of all trades. You might invest in a food company and a water bottle company and a clothing company and a consumer gadgets company. Why? Because of vibes, because you think you know the job to be done. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have the industry depth to make the key connections to different folks, whether it's go-to-market channels, the right trade shows, the right distributors. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of institutional consumer VC funds have. When you have angels, you tend to have folks who just really love hiking or really good cooks, and they really know that they are former restaurant operators and they really know that space really well. And so there's a little bit more of an alignment. So when you pair the expertise that an angel brings, that's when you have to, mesh it well with, well, who are we as a company? What are our strategic strengths and weaknesses, and is there a mutual fit?
If you're enjoying Long Run Labs, we'd love it if you took a moment to leave a review. It only takes a minute, but it helps the show reach more people like you. If an episode has helped you think differently about your business or career, made a long run fly by, or taught you something new, scroll down in your podcast app and tap those stars and write a review. Thank you for your support. This episode is brought to you by Popfly. If you're a brand trying to reach outdoor, travel, and adventure audiences, Popfly is where you should be running your creator program. It connects you with the largest community of adventure creators on the planet, people who actually use the gear, live the lifestyle, and have built real trust with their audiences. Popfly handles the whole operation: affiliate links, discount codes, creator and ambassador collaborations, all in one place. No more chasing people down over email. You scale brand momentum, track what's actually working, and every mention comes from a place of credibility because the creators you're working with genuinely mean it. Go to popfly.com to check it out, and if you want to reach out to them, let them know that we sent you. Can you think of any consumer VCs that are doing it well?
You know what? I trust your judgment more on this. I would love to hear what you think it has to say.
So Next Ventures is one led by Mel Strong and Lance Armstrong, and then the third partner is a guy named Jordan who lives in New York. They were early at Aura and consumer technology like that. So in the health and performance space, they're an investor in Eternal, which is a company I'm consulting for, and they have an eye for catching things early on the consumer side, and they've attached themselves to rocket ships. They're probably at a 500x with Aura.
That's incredible.
Or something to that effect. But Mel spent 17 years at Nike, so she knows the space intimately from that. She's a big runner, and Lance is obviously a world-class cyclist. Yeah, Lance. And so I think you need, to your point, like you need people like that at the helm who are dogfooding it, and they're finding things that they wish existed and then accelerating them.
When they have a acute awareness of the problem, they're the ones who get it. Like the people who are the most excited about our initial products, whether it's just an initial user or even a prospective investor, none of which we haven't taken the investors yet. When we think about them, they're people who understand, like, wow, yeah, hot weather clothing right now kind of sucks, and I want this for myself. To them, it becomes an acute problem that's personal, not just one that's a theoretic or a SWOT analysis. It's one that they would actually use in their day to day. There's something else on my mind. I'm sure it'll come back.
So when you're building this business and you're bootstrapping it from the start, is the intention to continue to like build a profitable enough business that like you're not burning cash and you can continue to retain full ownership, or is your vision eventually I'll need institutional investment or angel investment, and at that time I need the right fit, but for now I want to drive the ship myself?
It's the former. Barring any drastic change of circumstances, Daniel and I have talked about, and we're clear that, we are fully intent on owning and operating this, because there's a certain beauty when we can remain fully vested in the problem. And, we're not just seeking an exit. We want to actually build something like artistic and beautiful rather than just chase a certain valuation. I think when you see companies that have, especially in the peak D2C valuation era that you saw in the late 2010s, extraordinary valuations for companies like Casper and Allbirds, because you had a lot of this idea of unbelievable multiples, almost like tech-like multiples. And the fact is, the consumer goods industry doesn't really operate that way. Yeah. So when you have, for example, an investor or a principal who had years of experience at Nike, they're deeply familiar to have level set expectations. That is not always the case when you have folks come from other industries into VC. And then as far as our intentions, we think Patagonia is just a masterfully run company. We have many things, very positive things to say about them. And so by retaining the creative control, that ultimately makes sure that we don't lose out on the core audience or the core problem to be solved. And so
how does that change how you operate?
Well, quite candidly, it means we're a little bit slower. We don't have as much money to throw at meta ads. One thing, by the way, and we can talk about this later, we have resisted the use of AI actually in the generation of a lot of our, well, not a lot of, all of our marketing materials. It's just us making it by hand, using the Adobe suite. And when you have these certain principles, like, hey, because we have a craft small batch product, we want to signal that by not cheaping it by using just like run-of-the-mill Gen AI slop. That means that we have to create it ourselves. But oh wait, we're bootstrapped, so that means it's us doing it. And when it's us, for example, when Doug has to create things on Adobe InDesign or Adobe Illustrator, or edit photos in Adobe Lightroom, but then also has to think about barcodes and also has to think about this product change and also has to think about retailing events, or responding to journalist inquiries or administration stuff, all of a sudden, like, wow, that social media post I should have been able to crank out in a few hours. Why did it take several days? And so, at the time of recording, and by this is live, you'll see for Terlingua Threads, we are puny, barely a following. And that's because we spent 2 years really getting the product perfect and then the supply chain ironed out. And oh crap, we have to think about marketing and social media. So when you bootstrap, the benefit is that you get to really be that Renaissance man or Renaissance woman. The downside is the trade-off is velocity. The hope, though, is that by having these skills, you can remain more attuned to the product lifecycle or the product consumer feedback loop.
3 of the ways to build a brand are sales-led, marketing-led, or product-led. Would you say that from a growth standpoint, would you say that you're in that product-led camp and the bet is that people are going to love this so much that they're going to tell their friends about it?
That is the hope. We already are playing in a niche. We tell people straight up, if it's below 70 degrees, this is probably not going to be a good thing to wear. Like, this is not a winter layer. We are very transparent with what the drawbacks are. So we're already playing with a very niche thing. We want to do that one thing excellently. The other benefit of being bootstrapped, though, is that you don't have these external pressures of having 100x returns. And so if things are not as large of a company, or if they're not as fast, guess what? We have the permission to stay small and to stay well-crafted and beautiful and artisan. That is one of the best things about retaining the creative control, is you get to actually control the output.
Yeah, I mean, if you build a $2 million a year brand and your margins are 20% and you're taking home $200K each, that's not a bad lifestyle.
That would be a great goal. Oh man, right now we are very much in the red. So if that is the goal, if that is the future one day, I'd be very happy.
Yeah. But that's the upside of a lifestyle business. You can stay at 1 to 2 million. And if you have 2 co-founders, that's great.
I let's put it this way. For me, it's truly not about having an extractionary business or having outsized returns that is like ungodly wealthy. Terlingua Threads will never make us private jet wealthy. We know that. And we're okay with that. That's not our goal.
It won't.
If Patagonia decides to buy us, then could be a different thing. But there are so many other things I'd spend other than private jets. But the point stands, we're very realistic. Like, what are we trying to chase? Because if we wanted outsized returns, well, then we'd be chasing fast exits. And frankly, we're not in the right industry for fast exits at this point. That was long gone, half a decade or a decade ago.
I want to go back to the fact that you're building this business with your best friend. There's a level of trust that exists, and then there's a level of risk that comes with doing something like that. Talk me through that decision and how you've been able to protect a relationship while growing a business.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, one of my personal beliefs is always preserve relationships, no matter what. Money can come and go, but people are here. The Harvard Happiness Study, the biggest predictor of longevity and happiness is, the quality and quantity of meaningful relationships. That is how I'm so blessed to have people who love me deeply and whom I love really deeply. That's why my life is rich, not because of certain assets or wealth or lack thereof I have. It's the people. And so that makes it easy to frame. As far as, Daniel, it's the fact that I just so deeply respect him, not just for his character, but for his insights and his brilliance. So the way we have set up, he's actually, he works on this part-time because he has his other venture that he does full-time. He's been doing that longer. And so, we have, it roughly equates to a 90 to 10 split. So I'm ultimately the decision maker. That doesn't mean that, it's Doug's way that always goes. I assume that Daniel is smarter than me on a lot of things. And so if he pushes back like, Doug, this is not a wise decision, most of the time I listen and it's like, okay, let's do that. So I think it can get trickier if it were to be pure 50-50 splits or even 51-49 splits. The fact that there is a clear decision maker, me, who deeply, deeply loves and respects the minority stakeholder, Daniel, that makes it a lot easier. It's more organic, natural dynamics.
That makes sense. So you mentioned you're not using AI in the marketing production or the marketing material production. Are you using it in other components of the business?
We've tried to. When it comes to, for example, research, in terms of development, we hoped that it would be more helpful than it actually ended up being. The fact is, our manufacturing and design partners are such experts in their fields when it comes to the existing textiles that we could have really just relied on them rather than having to use Claude or ChatGPT. So we haven't really there. In terms of our own internal organization, perhaps, we try to use it. For now, though, at the scale that we're currently at, we're just iterating. We're just doing an initial launch. I'm sure that as we go from scrappy startup to more enterprise level, there are great applications for AI. I'm not anti-AI as a technology, but as far as demonstrating this craftsmanship ethos, the fact that we make in small batches in Portugal, we'd be remiss to leave our marketing copy to that. But
what about on the financial side of things, or the infrastructure, or the anything like that?
We are really scrappy. We're just using QuickBooks. That's how we, actually, I will say this. QuickBooks has done a really good job. As much as I hate their pricing and their monopoly on this, they have done an excellent job in incorporating AI tools into bookkeeping. So I think in those mundane administrative tasks.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love it to use more AI along those lines so that we can spend more time on the craft and art side with the product. I think those are great uses of AI.
Yeah. Okay, so we're recording this on Friday, March 27th. The launch is at some point in April.
Yeah.
What do the next few weeks look like, and what will you be really proud of on launch day?
Oh, goodness. So lots of concurrent work streams. So this is where I go back to, you're really wearing a lot of hats. So we're, putting the final touches on the website. We have finally onboarded and fully integrated with our warehouse. We're going to be distributing from Brooklyn, getting the inventory all well in place. We're all connected from a 3PL standpoint. From the marketing side, getting some more social media posts. And again, we're going to have a small presence. We're not going to have the budget nor the posts of the Vioris or the Arc'teryxes or the Fjallravens of the world, and that's okay. We also are, have been contacted by some press agencies who are really interested in our product. They've gotten wind, many of whom, from the Outdoor Marketing Alliance. So that was a really exciting thing. Beyond that, in-person customer activations, and also not just when it comes to like D2C, but also retail. We are going to be making an appearance at the Grassroots Outdoor Alliance, their Connect show in Reno, which is a time for around 110 or so affiliated independent family-owned stores, kind of like the independent versions of REI. They have all their buyers go to Reno, Nevada for 5 hours on a Sunday in June. And it's a way for them to learn about the new upcoming brands. So we were invited to be a participant with that. And with that, there's a lot of, physical assets that we have to develop. So, again, if I look tired, you're allowed to say it.
So the go-to-market strategy is a lot of in-person storytelling and product demonstration, allowing people to touch and feel it. What about the digital component?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I think my personal weakness is on the digital front. I didn't even post on social media between around August 2024 to this, March, this month, time recording. So I tend to be more of a private person. I tend to really not be self-aggrandizing or look what I did. So a lot of these digital storytelling things don't come fluently or naturally to me. So this is where, when you're working at a startup, I think your listeners would be really well to know that we're learning things too. And we're iterating, we're trying things out. One of the coolest stories, I actually met the founder of, or one of the co-founders of Craig Hill yesterday. They do really beautiful consumer goods. I was floored. Everything that they do looks like it deserves a spot in a MoMA store. And he mentioned that for a long time, they just didn't have a strong digital presence. But in late 2024, what they started doing, they just started telling the story of how they built these assets. And within 2025, they went from 50,000 followers to 600,000 followers. So a net delta of 11x, 550,000 growth. That just came through trial and error, not because they followed a playbook. And so in our case, we don't have a playbook to follow. So at the time of listening to this, and maybe several months after, we might still have a small presence, but we'll trial and error. Yeah, that's part of the building a startup.
Shameless plug for a sponsor of this show, Popfly. Popfly makes it really easy to reach a lot of influencers and creators on the UGC side of things in particular. And they have a product seeding function as well. They have an affiliate function that you as the brand operator can push out a brief, and it goes to 10,000 creators, and you can choose to do a paid campaign or a gifted campaign with small asks as well. So down the road, that could be an avenue that's more of a scalable approach to the growth as well.
I have a sticky note in my booth right now. I just wrote that down. Popfly.
Yeah, it's a good one. We'll be doing some documentation and storytelling around brands that are working with Popfly to kind of talk through how it works, and much of the work that I've done in the UGC and in the partnership space is the success of these campaigns is dependent on having the right infrastructure in place. And I've done a handful of partnerships with brands that I love, and the outcome was poor because it wasn't managed or measured properly. And it was probably successful, but there was no way to capture that attribution or impact. And so these tools like a Popfly, like a super affiliate, like any of these affiliate platforms, or not any, some are terrible. And I've used them all. It makes it a lot easier to manage a program like this and then measure what's working and what's not, and create that feedback loop of what's resonating and how do we do more of the things that make sense.
I have starred and circled that. I need to follow up with you after the show about them. That sounds like exactly what we'll need.
Yeah. I would love to have a separate conversation on that down the road.
Yeah,
for sure. Was there anything else that you wanted to chat through today that we haven't gotten to talk about yet?
Well, I think the closing sentiment on my end is that I think this is actually a really exciting time to build a business. No, for what it's worth, one of the reasons why I'm not personally anti-AI when it comes to using it is because it's a really great way to learn about different fields you might not have a lot of knowledge on as like an introductory course. And, we see a lot what's going on in the world from an economic standpoint, hyper oligopolization of businesses, headcount reduction, fill in the blank. And so the traditional corporate ladder has been a little bit shaken, and that might be putting it gently. And so you have a lot of folks, my former coworkers and a lot of friends of mine who are kind of nervous. And I just see what, you and like a lot of great folks are doing, where they're charting their own path. I'm ever an optimist. I think that we as a species are extraordinarily resourceful and insightful. We have made it through very hard challenges, even as a society. I believe that the rest of the 2020s and especially the 2030s are going to be the next era of small business. And so I think, I remain deeply optimistic. And so if there are ways that people can just even learn from Terlingua and see the mistakes in real time that we're making and us figuring it out, hopefully it makes the idea of starting your own venture a little bit less daunting. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have a crazy capital stack. You just have to put in a little bit of effort.
I love that. A little or too much self-belief that you're the one to do it and that you'll just kind of figure it out. So as I was saying before, it took me 3 years to quit my job, but when I finally did, I had built the parachute. So I knew when I jumped out of the plane, what my way down looked like. I wasn't starting from scratch right there.
Yeah.
And perhaps my parachute was a little too detailed, and I knew the details of what the chute would look like a little too much, but that's what it took. And I think that there's a lesson in that if you want to do something, start doing it slowly, or just go all in, and pressure makes diamonds, and you'll kind of crash and burn or figure it out. So,
but the last comment I want to add on that is that in terms of a parachute, viewing your friends as a parachute, I think Scott Galloway, I think, has so many wonderful things to say, and he's a fellow Bruin, so go Bruins. But he says this not even often enough. I think it's worth saying. Greatness isn't the agency of others. So entrepreneurship is really taxing and really lonely. So the fact that you have those around you that believe in you, or at least will be a shoulder to cry on or celebrate with, or whatever it is, the friendships, not the network, but the friendships are what make life so rich.
Love it. Doug, this has been a masterclass in business building and taking risks. I love it.
Hardly.
15 seconds. What's Terlingua? Why should people check you out?
We are hot weather apparel that is designed for 90 degrees and above. We are made in Portugal in small batches, and we feature only natural fibers, no microplastics. It's one of the most breathable things you can wear, and check us out. We're brand new.
Last lesson is take away from that, like nail your pitch. The pitch you have, it is clear, it is concise, and you got to know your value prop, and it's clear you know yours.
I mean, you've seen from the show, I'm a very verbose, overly wordy person. But as far as that, what we know how to communicate
Precise.
that.
Yeah. Where can we find you?
You can find us at terlinguathreads.com. On our Instagram page, it's at Terlingua Threads. We'll also be posting pop-ups that we have throughout the United States. And then we will be hopefully making it into some retail stores in the near future. We're already having a few of those initial conversations. Really exciting.
Cool. Doug, appreciate it. And have a great weekend.
Likewise. Take care.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Long Run Labs. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building something of their own. We'll be back next Tuesday with more stories at the intersection of endurance and entrepreneurship from the people shaping the outdoor industry in ways big and small. Until then, keep showing up, keep asking questions, and we'll see you out there.